Why choose a Sleep Number smart bed?
Can I make my side softer?
Can I make my side firmer? Can we sleep cooler?
Sleep Number does that. Cools up to 8 times faster and lets you choose your ideal comfort on either side. Your Sleep Number setting. It's the Sleep Number Everything Smart Bed sale. Every smart bed and base are on sale during our Memorial Day event. Up to 50% off, plus free home delivery. Limited time. Exclusively the Sleep Number store near you. Learn more at sleepnumber.com.
Men, if you're ready to reclaim your edge, listen up. I used to be held back by constant bathroom trips, with multiple wake-ups during my sleep and looking for restrooms whenever I was out. Then I discovered Better Man. After just 2 months, I started experiencing fewer trips to the bathroom, less urge to go, and I even slept through some nights. I feel a noticeable boost in my overall well-being, even sexual stamina. It gives me the freedom and confidence to live life on my terms. Better Man is clinically tested and trusted by thousands of men over 25 years. Ready to take back control? Go to BeBetterNow.com to order your supply today. That's BeBetterNow.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Use as directed. Individual results may vary.
Hello, book lovers. Welcome to Must Love Books. Welcome back to Must Love Books. Today, I'm here with New York Times bestselling author, Jacqueline Carey. Jacqueline Carey is the bestselling author of the critically acclaimed and award-winning Kushiel's Legacy series of historical fantasy novels. Her recent novels also include the Shakespearean adaptation, Miranda and Caliban, and the epic fantasy standalone, Starless. In addition to writing, Jacqueline enjoys cooking, gardening, photography, and doing research on a wide variety of arcane topics. An affinity for travel has taken her from Iceland to China to date, and she currently lives in West Michigan. Hello and welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me.
I am so happy to have you here, truly.
My pleasure.
I first started Kushiel's Dart back in, I want to say 2003, so not right when it came out, but it was still fairly new, and I absolutely loved it. Truly, you are a master at world building.
Thank you very much.
So before romantasy was even coined as a genre, which we all hear about romantasy now, you blessed us with the world of Terre d'Ange, and now we're being blessed again with the recent release of CASSIEL'S Servant. For any listeners who are new to your work, can you introduce us to Terre d'Ange and Joscelin?
I can. Kushiel's Legacy, which is sort of the umbrella term we're going with for the series, is set in an alternate medieval Provence, basically. And it has its own theology, partially inspired by the Book of Enoch. We have a deity born of the mingled tears of the Magdalene and the blood of Yeshua ben Yosef, known to us more commonly as Jesus Christ. And I sent them wandering across the earth along with a handful of fallen angels and settled them in France. And so we have a nation of obnoxiously pretty people for whom sex is a sacrament. And that's the essential setting of the world building. The protagonist of CASSIEL'S Servant, who is a major supporting character in the original trilogy, is in this very opulent, decadent, intrigue-heavy setting. He is a very stoic, celibate warrior priest. Or as someone on a panel said recently, hot priest.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I am telling his version of the story 20-some years after the original.
And what inspired you to return and tell us Joscelin's story?
You know, it's funny. It's one of those questions I'd been asked often. You get, will you ever tell so-and-so's story? And Joscelin's came up quite a bit. And I always said, no, that story is thoroughly told. does not need to be re-examined from another point of view. And when I wrote Starless, I even created a sort of warrior priesthood. And I'm like, haha, now I'll never do a CASSIEL'S servant sort of thing. And then I was asked to contribute something special for a fundraiser I was supporting, and I decided to write an Elizabethan sonnet, as one does. So I was immersed in the writing of Miranda and Caliban at the time. And I polled my readers and said, who would you like a sonnet from and to? And they quite unanimously said, from Joscelin to Phaedra, who is the heroine of the original trilogy. And I said, all right. I sat down, wrote a Shakespearean sonnet, and it was the first time I'd really given voice to Joscelin. I had voiced him from a third person point of view, but never his own voice. And it was tremendously compelling. And I thought, oh my God, I think I do want to write a story. So it is, some of it's a labor of love. Some of it is, this is a different doorway into this world. And it's one that's, in an odd way, a lot more accessible because it isn't as dense with intrigue. He is a character who does not care about politics and intrigue. He was raised with the understanding that that's kind of gauche. We're old money. We don't do that.
I love how it came from this one-off Elizabethan sonnet. That is
14
amazing.
lines.
14 lines.
Yep.
So I'm going to ask you one thing. This is something that I've seen a lot of book clubs discuss regarding the Kushiel's Legacy series. And I've seen like people discuss it on YouTube and in-person clubs. And it is always brought up the pronunciations.
Oh, yeah.
No. Now we do have more audiobooks, coming out than when the series was first releasing, but it still is something that I see come up a lot for when people read it without listening. And so can you, right here, right now, give us a little bit of a pronunciation guide so listeners can hear these names straight from your mouth?
I will not. I will not do that. But I will tell you why. And I think this was at some point on the FAQ on my site. There's a really wide range depending on how much you want to anglicize it or not. And I've seen English-speaking readers go, huh? When a French-speaking reader is discussing how much they love the relationship between Phaedra and Joscelin. I'm not going to impose that.
That is true. We all have our own different dialects, and just the way that we read things, it kind of sounds different to us in our own heads.
Yeah, so I tend to anglicize gently. So Phaedra, Joscelin, but not Phaedra and Joscelin, although they all get spelled a number of ways in the correspondence I receive. But I really would prefer to leave it to the reader to decide how comfortable they are with it. And there are audiobooks if you really want to go with, and even to that, I know the narrator of the first trilogy probably leaned a little more into the French than I would have done myself.
Excellent. I love that. So everyone can kind of just not really create their own versions of the name, but, read it in a more accessible way so that they can understand the character names how they choose to.
Yeah, I don't want people to be constantly stumbling mentally, trying to go, oh, what is that strangled R sound at the end of Fedl? I can't even do it properly. I am not a Francophone.
I took 2 years of French, and you know what? I can't always pronounce some specific spellings either.
I studied more than 2 years, but it's really, really rusty.
So your books have so many political undertones, especially I think in Phaedra's trilogy. I think there is at least as much politics as there is eroticism. How do you navigate incorporating politics into your fantasy world?
It depends on the book. With her story, I just really wanted some dense, chewy intrigue. I enjoy that. So all of the action comes out of the intrigue that's set up. The first book is kind of a slow ratcheting up where you're like, oh my God, all of these characters, what are their relationships? How do I keep track of them all? And I know it can be a little much, which is, again, part of the reason I wanted to use a different approach with CASSIEL'S Servant. But then once you get to the point where there's an inciting event, everything kind of takes off like a slingshot, and all of the politics that you've created to set up these dynamic situations are now moving pieces that are fun and exciting.
It is like a very dense and long game of chess.
Yeah.
It's how it really plays out to me. It is a very, like, the deepest game of chess.
Well, with Melisande, who for new readers is a major villain, whose primary attribute is she is terrifyingly smart, terrifyingly beautiful, and terrifyingly smart. And so I kind of had to be thinking her 3 moves ahead of everything else in order to set up those dominoes.
And it means, to me at least, this means that you have to have a very detailed idea of what you are working with in the story. I'm assuming this is not something that you can just, come up with and write without any kind of planning.
Yeah, I am a plotter to the nth degree. And I've been on panels where literally there was an intuitive writer at the far end of the spectrum and me at the other end going, you did what?
And that writer was probably thinking the exact same thing.
Yeah, they're thinking, oh, your process sounds agonizing.
So in your process, do you use outlines? Do you have like a big board where you string things together like in a a cop show? How do you handle this?
Yeah. Whiteboard and red thread.
Exactly.
I actually, most of the outlining I do in my head, which is admittedly a really crowded place by now. But I have tons of notebooks scattered all over the house, which will have jottings of characters, plot twists, elements, things I want to incorporate, sometimes blueprints, sketches for weapons I'm inventing.
Wow.
So it's a piecemeal process, but I do so much of it in advance.
Do you have like the entire thing planned out before you sit down and write?
I have the entire structure planned out, not every detail of it. Of anything I've ever read that resonated for me personally about the writing process, I once read a comment that Stephen King has written so many novels that involve a writer losing their marbles because at some level we don't really know how we do what we do. And one of those books had a writer with writer's block, and as it cleared, he described it felt like moving into a house and all the furniture is still under packing wraps, but everything is there. The house is there and it's solid and you've got everything you need to furnish it. And I'm like, yep, that feels right.
Yeah, that's a really good analogy.
Yeah. Yeah, he's, he may have a future, that Stephen King guy.
Yeah, I think he might go somewhere.
Yeah.
So are there any real world events or references that inspire your writing?
Yeah, constantly. Some direct, some indirect. With the Kushiel's Legacy series, that's more actual historical research. And it's fun to have people occasionally tell me a little tidbit like, did you know that Venice was known as the Serene Republic? And you called it La Serenissima. What an amazing coincidence. So there's a lot of actual history and mythology I draw from. A book I've been thinking about quite a bit now is what was known originally as Elegy for Darkness, became split into 2 volumes by Tor, Banereeker and Godslayer, which is my rewriting of epic fantasy as epic tragedy. And one of the primary political and philosophical points behind it is good versus evil. A lot of which is which depends on who has the better PR machine. I wrote that against the backdrop of the US invasion of Iraq. And that's something that's come back into my mind quite a bit in the last year.
Yes, unfortunately, that's something that can really inspire a lot of political tellings right there alone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, working in fantasy, the references tend to be less obvious, but the inspiration is there.
Especially with the things going on this last year.
Yeah.
So in Kushiel's Legacy, this is a very feminist, sex positive, and queer positive story. How would you say that these themes translate over to CASSIEL'S Servant?
It's really the flip side, because Joscelin, the protagonist, has been committed before his birth to the Castlean Brotherhood. It is his choice to join, matter of honor, but they are very much opposed to what the rest of Terradange believes and think sooner or later they're all going to come to their senses and leave off with the gay orgies and whatnot. But because the primary driving force of this theology is the idea that love is a divine agency that in this world is capable of affecting real change, he gradually has to wrestle with love. And that oftentimes comes with the full spectrum of human sexual feelings. I think it's really worthwhile looking at these issues from the other side of the mirror.
And you can see, how he not only handles this thing, but how he really grows from it, because Joscelin really grows as a character. I mean, I think that's one of the many reasons why he is so beloved by fans too.
Well, and he's funny.
He is.
In a very low-key way. And you kind of need, because Fedra she is melodramatic. I mean, her voice is me turning loose all the lyricism I had in me.
She definitely has a flair for the dramatic.
Yeah. So you kind of need that grounding foil to really, they reflect each other well.
They do. Absolutely. You got to have that balance. And they do balance each other. So in Terradange, we really intermingle spirituality and sexuality. And in these stories, as you have also said yourself, sex is kind of like a religious experience. What inspired you to blend these two sides of humanity?
Growing up reading fantasy primarily in the 70s and 80s, there was not a lot of fantasy written by women. There were not a lot of female characters in fantasy in general. And sex was so not a component of it. And that is an essential part of the human experience. And there have existed religions in which sexuality was sacred. You can't really have a fertility cult without
Exactly.
a nod to the sacred nature of sex. And so that was the pendulum swinging in the other direction. When I conceived of this idea, and the character of Fedra was really what came first. After examining all the would I, could I, should I just kind of went all in.
Throw it all to the wind.
Yeah.
Take a jump and see what comes from it. And you know what? It worked out wonderfully.
I think the ideas that scare you are often the best ones. And this was a big enough idea that it scared me. It was not my first novel. First published, but I have trunk novels, as many writers do.
Well, I am so glad personally that this one made it to the light of day.
Me too.
So, why don't you, since you mentioned a little bit, why don't you tell us a little bit more about your publishing journey and how you got, when you started writing and now that we see where you are today, bestseller?
I started writing in high school. Teachers love this story because I was ungodly bored. And I would sit in the classroom and I started a novel in the back of my notebook. And it looked like I was taking notes. So I'd just sit there and it was sort of a fantasy, sort of a soap opera. It ran through about 3 generations
Wow.
worth of characters, had all the tropes, all the elements. It was a hot mess. Uh, and I just kind of kept it like some teenagers keep a diary, but I kept it up all through college and did not major in creative writing or writing of any sort. I English literature and psychology, and then graduated and went, I don't know what I want to do with my life.
As we
So
all do.
I know. Why do they put so much pressure on young people to choose and not just live and experience?
Exactly.
So I took part in a program that gave me a 6-month work permit for the UK, and I got a job in a bookstore in London. And while I was there, I'm still writing this endless diary novel. I thought, people do this for a living, which in hindsight was kind of naive of me. But it was then that I began writing a book that had a proper plot structure, a beginning, a middle, an end, and really went, okay, I'm going to give myself, I think, a year after that to try and finish this book and get it published. That would be one of my trunk novels, but it's what started me on that path. And it was probably 10 years later that I began the novel that became Kushiel Star. The good thing about sort of banging your head against the wall for 10 years is I had the querying process down really well.
I bet.
And at that point, self-publishing was not really an issue yet. There was not an indie book world. So I succeeded in finding an agent on the strength of that book who fell in love with it. And it's both a provocative and huge and unusual enough work that it really needed the right person to fall in love with it. And that happened. And that happened again when it went to auction. And my editor at Tor fell in love.
Well, and it wasn't just your editor and your agent who fell in love. There are many of us.
This is awesome.
So now that you have this retelling out, what book order do you recommend new readers following? Do you think they should start with Joscelin's story or read Phaedra's story and then come back to Joscelin?
It kind of depends on what sort of reader you are. For immediate accessibility, I like Joscelin's story. I was just talking to a friend the other day who admitted guiltily that she's like, I couldn't. She's like, I've tried with Dart. I loved Starless. I loved all the Agent of Hell books. I just couldn't. And, yeah, I understand the dramatis personae alone has some people go, ooh, that's a lot of characters.
Yes.
So it just, I was the kind of reader who, in my reading heyday, if I were going on a trip, I looked for a chunk. I mean, I was looking for the biggest stopper I could find. Quality mattered. But I'll be honest, sometimes I went for sheer quantity.
I think, at least with many of us big readers, reading in the heyday, which I love that phrase. I also went through a big, what's the biggest book I can find phase. And I just spent a whole year just straight up only reading the biggest, thickest, chunkiest books I could possibly get my hands on.
You're like, will it give me carpal tunnel?
Yeah. Exactly. Because I spent so long where I could finish a book in a day, and I'm like, I need something that's gonna just take up all of my time because back then we had nothing but time.
Yeah, when I was still working a day job, I worked for a local college, managing the office of their art department. And one of my student assistants laughed one time and pointed out to me that I said, on a Friday, I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to take off. I got to get to the library before it closes because I got to get some books for the weekend. And she said, it's the plural that got me. Books. Books for the weekend. One wasn't enough for you. And I'm like, it's 2 whole days. No.
Right? 2 days of nothing to do. I mean,
Yeah.
then again, it does depend on how thick those books are, but a free weekend of nothing to do, you can really put away, knock a few off your list.
In the heyday, for sure.
In the heyday. So I'm sure this next question is one that you get a lot. And I'd be shocked if you didn't hear this a lot, but I'm sure you do. After Game of Thrones was such a big hit on HBO, I always thought that Kushiel's Dart would be next. And I was like, always just like, Kushiel's Dart movie, Kushiel's Dart TV show, like Googling, like somebody tell me something. Do you think that's something that could ever happen?
It's, I won't say it's come close, but it has been optioned more than once. It has been shopped around. It has had people without quite enough clout to make that happen fall in love with it. I don't know. The stars may yet align. We actually do have a new team working on a new pitch, inspired in part by CASSIEL'S Servant and the accessibility of Joscelin's point of view. I've always had a attitude of I'm not holding my breath. And the terrifying thing, of course, is it could be done badly in so many ways.
Oh, absolutely.
And I know readers are like, promise that you'd be involved and never let that happen. And I would love to be able to make that promise, but I know enough about Hollywood to know unless you have the literal clout of like a Rowling.
Yes.
That kind of control is just unrealistic. So all we can do is live in hope.
Well, I really hope that with the release of Joscelin's story, people will start looking at it again and, let's have the Kushiel's legacy resurgence.
Yeah. I've been on TikTok for the past year. In part because Tor re-released the original trilogy in preparation for CASSIEL'S Servant.
Yes, the new covers.
Yeah, new covers, and there is a whole new generation of readers who are romantasy. I don't know if we've hit peak romantasy or just past it, but it has been white hot in the past year or 3.
Yeah, it is something that's definitely been building romantasy and also dark romance, which I think Phaedra's story can fall under as well. Those are 2 extremely popular genres right now. I mean, obviously so much that we created a whole new term for it.
Right.
Romantasy didn't exist 3 years ago, and now so it's definitely something that is really gaining a lot of momentum. And I don't think we've quite hit peak yet. I think we've got more building that's going to be happening out there. So yeah, I think a lot of new readers are going to be drawn into this world that you've created for us.
Yeah, I think so, and I hope so. And I think too, for readers who some of the hot romantasy titles skew young adult or were originally published as young adult. And as they're aging out of that psychological dynamic a little bit, there's a little more of certainly as you go on, more mature sensibility to the Kushiel's Legacy series.
Yeah, I do think a lot of romantasy readers do kind of start with the YA type of books, and then as they realize how much they love this genre, really expand and broaden to more mature content, if you will.
But it's and yes, in terms of the spice factor, I'm up there. But also there's an emotional sensibility that changes. I know I've had some readers say, wow, I reading this at 40 is so much different than reading it at 20. particularly the later books. And well, that's good. It's good to know they reward rereadings in different ways.
Yeah, well, as you grow, your perspective changes and the way that you view relationship dynamics and even the political dynamics also grows as you grow. So, yeah, I can definitely see how revisiting it, for those who read it when they were first released 20-ish years ago, and then rereading now, definitely being able to see a different perspective and a whole new appreciation.
That's what I'm hoping for.
I think it'll succeed. So are there any, and maybe you don't have anything to share, but are there any new projects right now that you could give us any hints about that you might be working on?
I just yes. It had been under wraps, and the deal isn't 100% finalized, but I am working on something new, totally different. This is going to be a contemporary, I'm calling it psychological suspense.
Ooh.
But it does have some supernatural elements. Going with the working title Masquerade right now.
Ooh.
That's
I'm already intrigued.
apt, and it kind of ties a little to some of my other work. So I don't have a lot to say about it yet, but I'm excited about it. It's been gestating for over a year, and I've done a lot of weird research, and I'm excited to have started on it.
That sounds amazing. I'm definitely excited and cannot wait until you can share more on it. And also, we should never, ever, ever look at an author's search history
Oh my God.
in regards to weird research.
Yeah. Well, let's see. I'm trying to contortionists, cults, and magic.
There you go.
There's 3 topics.
I love that. And that's definitely something that I could see blending into a really neat story.
Yeah, I hope so.
And I like the little bit of a genre blending bit of an idea you have on there as well. Maybe you'll be able to create another, coin term like romantasy. Maybe you'll blend some genres and create a whole new term.
I hope I live long enough to find out what it is. It's 20 years later.
Right? So besides your own books, what is a book or a series that you recommend to other readers?
Because my books span a spectrum, and so do my readers. Guy Gabriel Kay is the author who I enjoy and admire and am most comfortable recommending. He writes alternate history, historical fantasy as well, or work that you can tell what the analog history country is, and also writes with a lot of lyricism and strong use of mythology. And he's one of the few writers in fantasy who, for me, can really invoke a sense of the numinous. A lot of fantasy, you feel as though the gods they're it's like a video game. They've just got more powers. And there's genuine awe in his work, which is something I aspire to as well. So that's my number 1 recommendation.
That sounds amazing. And what are you currently reading now?
I just started something called The Silent Patient, which is a psychological thriller, which was recommended to me as a sort of, well, you might want to look at some works in this genre.
To help you get the vibes, as the kids say today.
Yeah, some authors are kind of, oh, no, I have this incredibly unique idea that nobody else has ever had, and I don't want anything to taint it. I'm like, there's very little new under the sun. Bring it on. I want to know what everybody else has done.
Exactly. I mean, there are, hundreds and hundreds of years of literature. Of course, ideas are going to kind of overlap and have similar themes. No one's idea is going to be truly, completely original, not inspired by anything, not representative of another work. I mean, that's just not going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's too much out there for that to even be possible. So what is your all-time favorite book? Now, this is sometimes a question authors struggle with, and sometimes I've had people like just immediately snap and like, oh, it's this one. So what is your favorite book?
I actually remind myself of this from time to time because probably my favorite book, I think I said in I might have cited Watership Down.
That's a good
which
one.
is a book I'm super fond of for a variety of reasons. But when you ask just now, there's a book called The Horse of Selene, which was the author is Juanita Casey. And as far as I know, it's out of print. It is very beautiful, very poetic, very tragic. And I acquired a copy when I was working at that bookshop in London. And there are parts of it that are just so beautiful, it breaks my heart.
Wow.
And I think to myself, if ever I am feeling like my work is underappreciated, I remind myself that the book that I find the most beautiful is out of print. And it kind of gives me a good dose of perspective.
Well, I am immediately challenging myself to find a copy.
I think used copies are probably available.
Yeah, we have thrift books these days, and they can find pretty much anything used. So it might not be as big of a challenge.
Yeah, that's true. But it's a book that's kind of like, I'll be honest, James Joyce, an author I struggle with, falls under the category of admire more than a joy for me. And this is a book that takes all of the uniquely Irish lyricism of Joyce and serves it up in a manner that's just ideally suited for me, for my palate.
So before we wrap up here today, do you have any final messages that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Right now, I just can't get that whole Elmo thing out of my head. I just want to say, is everybody okay? How you doing? It's going to be all right. It will.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being with us today. This has been Jacqueline Carey. Everyone check out CASSIEL'S Servant. Thank you, everyone, for listening. This has been Must Love Books. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Patreon under @MustLoveBooksPodcast. Thank you and happy reading.
Men, if you're ready to reclaim your edge, listen up. I used to be held back by constant bathroom trips with multiple wake-ups during my sleep and looking for restrooms whenever I was out. Then I discovered Better Man. After just 2 months, I started experiencing fewer trips to the bathroom, less urge to go, and I even slept through some nights. I feel a noticeable boost in my overall well-being, even sexual stamina. It gives me the freedom and confidence to live life on my terms. Better Man is clinically tested and trusted by thousands of men over 25 years. Ready to take back control? Go to BeBetterNow.com to order your supply today. That's BeBetterNow.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Use as directed. Individual results may vary.
Why choose a Sleep Number smart bed?
Can I make my side softer?
Can I make my side firmer? Can we sleep cooler?
Sleep Number does that. Cools up to 8 times faster and lets you choose your ideal comfort on either side. Your Sleep Number setting. It's the Sleep Number Everything Smart Bed Sale. Every smart bed and base are on sale during our Memorial Day event. Up to 50% off, plus free home delivery. Limited time. Exclusively to Sleep Number store near you. Learn more at sleepnumber.com.